All right, I'm gonna get started with today's assignment, or this week's assignment. So um, I've got basically an empty scene here, and I'm going to show you today a little bit of Unity's terrain editor, which is kind of cool. So if you go and create a 3D object, terrain. All right, now so we've got this essentially huge sort of open terrain map. So the terrain editor in Unity is really, really good for essentially large open terrains. And that's not exactly what we're going to be using it for here, but it's just kind of fun to use. And I think it works really well with our workflow, but we just need to modify it down a little bit. So if you've got it selected, go over here to settings for the terrain, open that up. Scroll down, and we're going to make this smaller. So today's lesson, today's assignment is only going to be about 60 meters. So go ahead and make the width and the length 60 meters. The terrain height, we obviously don't need a variance of, I guess, 600 meters in our height, so we're going to make that 30. If you think you need more, go ahead, but I don't think you can. 30, there we go. Okay. So yeah, go ahead if you want to, but I don't think you will. We don't need a lot of this this resolution here since it's going to be a much smaller sort of map, and the larger resolution just kind of gets in the way. So I'm going to set this to 128, and let's see, just 128 all the way down, 128, 128. Okay. So you don't really see much of a change there, although the size. But as you can see, essentially the placement is right here at 0, 0, and our heroes at that as well. So just to put this in the our hero in the center of the map, just going to go ahead and negative 30, negative 30. So we're now in the center. Yeah, probably. Yeah, scoot forward a little bit. So we've got a little bit of lead time as we move forward into the forest. So all right, now we've got this big white plane, and obviously that's not ideal. So let's go ahead and give it some texture. So if you go over here to the paintbrush tool right here, this is paint the terrain texture. This is pretty cool. So let's see, we need to first assign some textures to this. So if you go, let's see, hit edit textures, add texture, it pops up this little window here. And then go down here to assets, materials. And I've put a couple of materials here that are good for this terrain tool. So we'll go ahead and grab dirt and just drag it over here. For metallic, you can adjust this how you want. I would suggest 0.4, 0.05, oops, 0.05. And then this grid texture is a 4-meter grid texture, so I'm setting the size here for 4. Go ahead and add that. As you see, it goes ahead and populates that since that's the only texture that's defined for this terrain object. But you can go ahead and add other textures. As you've seen, I've got a couple of down here. It's 0.5, 4, and 4. So now I've got two textures to choose from. This is the default texture, which is sort of a dirt, and then a green texture. And then you've got these awesome like little brush tools here, almost kind of like Photoshop. So to tell you the truth, I really don't think you need most of this stuff, at least for this this assignment. Feel free to play if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and grab this. As you can see, it shows sort of my brush size that I'm going to be using here. I can increase that or decrease that, change the opacity. So essentially, you select the texture that you want to paint with, and then you start painting. Really, really easy to use. But don't go overboard right now. That's not the main part of what we do as far as texturing goes. It's kind of fun to play with, but for us being level designers, shape is really where it's at for us. So I'm going to go over here to the first button, raise and lower the terrain height. So it essentially uses the same brushes because this is this terrain is a height map. It's defined by a texture, and so the texture goes from completely white to completely black, and that sort of defines what the height is going to be. So I'm going ahead and select this, make this a little bit bigger, and let's go ahead and just so for demonstration purposes, make this kind of big. So you see it's applying that height map data into the geometry. And so if you just click and drag on the surface, it's going to make it higher. Now if you press Shift and you do the same thing, it's going to make it lower. You'd see like there's a limit to how low it can allow me to move this terrain. And that's because essentially the height data is from essentially where this object placement is all the way to, I think we set it to 30 meters of height variance. So you could make it 30 meters high, but you can't really go below that. So let's go ahead and make things a little bit more flexible for us. So if you go to, first of all, let's go ahead and set the actual Y of where this thing is down a bit. So let's go ahead and set it at -15. And so now it's way below where our hero is. But if you head over to this other tool right here, we're setting the terrain height, you can actually paint a specific height instead of painting a relative, like I want to push it up or I want to push it down. And it's got this flatten tool in here. So essentially you can set the height, and here I'm going to set it to 15 as sort of our zeroed out sort of version. So you know, you can set it to, oh, there we go. Essentially 15 means 15 above where it starts. And since our Y for the object is at -15, +15 basically flattens it out to exactly where 0 on the height is. So now, as we sort of model this, we'll have 15 meters downwards to work with and 15 meters upwards to work with, which is absolutely plenty for this type of scene right here, which is going to be a nice little forest here. So just wanted to point out a couple of other tools that we have at our disposal here in the terrain tool, which are kind of fun, but I don't suggest using for this class. There's a place trees and also place details, which is very similar actually. But so I've got a couple of trees actually that are defined in our let's see, prototypes here. So what you essentially do here, this allows you to create trees that are on this surface, and we'll go in here to foliage, grab this tree and drag it over here. Go ahead and add it. Oops. Hello? Okay, so you see that it's added here. I'll go ahead and add another tree. Let's see. I guess this dead one right here. And maybe one more just for fun. And now that you sort of have that, you can sort of paint the trees onto the surface. So, oh, that is quite a lot. So I'm going to undo that. Tree density is at 83. That's probably way too much here. And that's probably way too little. So I haven't really gotten too much into using this tool because it doesn't really suit me for my purposes. But if you wanted to, if you're on a different project, essentially, create sort of a very quick sort of forest. And I wish it was actually rotating more than it is, but it doesn't seem to. Maybe there's some sort of way to do that. But you can do essentially the same thing with trees, and you can do it with essentially like rocks and things like that. And what's kind of cool about it is that, for one thing, it automatically LEDs them out as you sort of get away from them, but also if you select the train and you sort of move it up like this, the trees actually move directly with it. So that's pretty cool. But for the purposes of this class, I'd suggest not using this. It's kind of just for your information and to see what kind of cool tools are here. But since we are sort of looking at a smaller scene as opposed to a wide open landscape, we have the time to place trees individually and to place them deliberately, and that's what we're going to do for this assignment. So you're welcome to play with this, but don't include it as part of the assignment. So I'm going to go ahead and remove each of these for my purposes.